Before we start, leave a like and check that you're subscribed, because that helps the video reach more fans and makes sure you won't miss any updates when a big story finally blows wide open. Turn on notifications and come with me, because what's surfaced about the Golden State Warriors and Klay Thompson stirs up the past, pride, resentment, and the future. And it's not an exaggeration to say this could change the way the fan base understands the end of an era. In the last few hours, the Warriors have started hinting again at something that, for a lot of people, seemed impossible until recently. The idea that, at some point, there might be a path for Klay Thompson to return in some form to Golden State. Calm down. This isn't a promise of a trade tomorrow. It's not like he's packing his bags today, nothing immediate. But a newly published deep dive came out, with interviews and behind-the-scenes details, and it brought back a conversation that never truly died. How the split between Klay Thompson and the Warriors happened, why it hurt so much, and why the topic is resurfacing now with a different tone. This piece spoke with Steph Curry, Draymond Green, people around the franchise, and Klay Thompson himself. And what it makes clear is that there's a massive emotional component to this story. Because Klay Thompson wasn't just another player on the roster. Klay Thompson was part of the dynasty's heartbeat, and when a player of that magnitude leaves in a turbulent way, the wound doesn't close just with time. It stays there, resurfacing with every comparison, every old photo, every memory of a big game. Every night the fan base thinks, it was supposed to be different. There's one line that sums up that feeling well. When someone points out that Steph Curry and Draymond Green have become the longest-tenured duo in franchise history, Draymond doesn't react like someone celebrating a record. He reacts like someone missing what should be being said. Because in his mind, it was never supposed to be a duo. It was supposed to be a trio. It was supposed to be Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson in the same sentence, the way the era was built. And when he sees the narrative being told without Klay's name, he basically says, "That's strange to me." And that strangeness is the perfect snapshot of what a lot of fans feel. The point is, Klay Thompson's exit from the Warriors wasn't a light goodbye, the kind with a hug and an immediate tribute. It was a drawn-out process, with friction, distrust, and different interpretations of the same stretch of time. From Klay Thompson's side, there was a conviction that he had given everything on the court, that he had sacrificed his body, that he had gone through injuries that could have ended anyone, and that he deserved a certain kind of final loyalty. From the organization's side, a different fear started to grow louder, the fear of paying big money for a player who wasn't physically the same anymore and was coming off serious injuries. When those two views collide, the relationship changes in nature. It stops being "we'll finish together" and becomes, "what's the risk of keeping this the way it is?" And then comes the hardest detail, which the piece addresses very directly. At some point, the perception inside the franchise started to treat Klay Thompson like an asset losing value, like he'd become a planning problem rather than a symbol. That's the part fans don't like to hear, but it happens all the time in the NBA. When a player's body starts sending signals and the performance curve drops, the whole league changes the way it talks. And to the athlete, that sounds like betrayal, because he thinks, "I'm the same guy who helped build this. I'm just trying to become myself again after everything I went through." Klay Thompson suffered multiple major injuries that wiped out seasons and disrupted the natural sequence of his career. And even so, he came back, had huge games, had performances that reminded people why his name carries so much weight in the franchise's history. But time doesn't rewind, the body doesn't come back the same, and defense especially starts demanding a price that fans can see on the screen and executives can see on a spreadsheet. So the Warriors gradually convinced themselves they didn't want to pay the number Klay believed he still deserved, and that's where the rupture solidified. What makes this story even more sensitive is that Steph Curry, when he talks about it, doesn't choose cold words. He goes straight to the point and lets the human side show. He wanted Klay Thompson to still be there. And when Steph Curry says that, it's not just a nice sentence. It's a sign that, internally, the ending didn't feel emotionally resolved for everyone. And that's why this report draws so much attention, because it shows that Klay Thompson's exit wasn't a natural closing, it was a separation with sharp edges. The piece also describes a moment that explains a lot about Klay's headspace at the time. After a reunion, he reportedly spent time in the home team's locker room celebrating and talking loudly, making it clear that, in his view, the Warriors had made a mistake. Klay Thompson's read was simple. You should have prioritized other things, but you never should have let me become a secondary option. The original text in that section is a bit confusing in how it builds the sentence, but the essence is crystal clear. Klay felt sidelined, felt like he wasn't treated as a real priority. Draymond Green, when he comments on that, doesn't seem surprised. He basically says it was expected because he's known Klay Thompson for 12 years. He knows Klay's emotion, knows Klay doesn't swallow that kind of thing quietly, knows Klay has pride and truly believes in what he brings. So for Draymond, it wasn't shock, it was consequence. And then comes the other side of the story, the one that sours everything. Behind-the-scenes accounts suggest that Klay Thompson, over time, heard that Joe Lacob kept telling various people that Klay should be grateful for the contract he'd already been given. At the same time, that same environment complained about the performance decline. Think about the impact when that gets back to the player. Be grateful is a phrase that, in an athlete's mind, sounds like, you've already been paid too much. And when that mixes with criticism of performance, the message becomes, you don't deliver what you used to, and you still want to be treated the same. That's gasoline on a relationship that was already fragile. The piece also revisits details that weigh on Klay's own narrative. One of Klay Thompson's major injuries happened in an informal game, a pickup run outside the team's control, away from the franchise facilities. And later, Klay himself acknowledged he could have been more careful in the recovery process from another important injury. But even with that acknowledgement, he still saw himself as someone who had done more than enough for the organization to deserve respect at the end. In his mind, the balance of everything he built mattered more than any risk argument in that moment. That set the stage for extremely exhausting negotiations in the summer of 2023 that went nowhere, and for the following season carrying the weight of contract on Klay Thompson's shoulder. And that's when you enter the phase where everything becomes a test. Every bad night becomes a verdict. Every coaching decision becomes a message. Every adjustment feels like humiliation. The text even mentions a role change, a move to the bench mid-season, and bursts of frustration from Klay behind the scenes after certain choices. It's the perfect recipe for a relationship with the franchise to deteriorate. And in the middle of that, one point always splits the fan base: the coach's handling. Some people put part of the problem on how Steve Kerr managed the situation, and the piece suggests a kind of isolation at certain moments, something that may have happened with other players during Kerr's time with the Warriors. When a team is used to winning, those decisions get harsher because the standard is higher and patience for decline is lower. But for an icon like Klay Thompson, being treated like anyone else can be taken as disrespect, even if the intent is purely competitive. From the Warriors' side, the official version is that there was an extension offer, 2 years, $48 million, back in 2023. But Klay Thompson's side didn't buy the story the way it was told. Klay's feeling was that the offer wasn't put on the table with real truth at the center as a priority. And then communication cooled. There was even off-court time together, like when Klay Thompson and Joe Lacob played golf, but the Klay's future topic supposedly wasn't confronted head-on. And when something that big isn't confronted, silence becomes the answer. Then comes the point that fueled the bitterness. During that period, the Warriors were linked to chasing big names. Rumors about stars popped up, market talks, that feeling that the franchise wanted to take one more swing before committing to what it already had. And in Klay Thompson's head, that meant one thing. You were waiting to see if you could get someone better before deciding whether I was worth what I was asking. Even if the franchise says, we respect our veterans, Klay seems to have read everything as a lack of priority. That's exactly why this report hits so hard now, because it doesn't paint Klay Thompson's departure as inevitable and natural. It paints it as a process where trust was chipped away, comments crossed the line, resentment grew, and when it was time to resolve it, there wasn't enough warmth left for a clean solution. And now, we get to the real reason this conversation is back in 2025, heading into 2026, because some comments suggest that, even after everything, there's a desire to close the cycle in a more dignified way. Steph Curry, for example, talks at minimum about a symbolic possibility, a one-day contract, something that would allow Klay Thompson to end his career as a Warrior. And that matters because it shows that, in Steph's mind, the ending is still open in some way. But Klay Thompson also makes it clear he's not living this topic like it's immediate. He answers cautiously, like someone who knows there's still road ahead. He doesn't know what the future holds. There's still a lot of basketball left. In other words, it's not yes, it's not I'm coming back. It's a we'll see. Even so, the piece brings a behind-the-scenes read that carries real weight. People around the league believe this reunion could happen one day, and the justification is simple and powerful. If anyone has real influence over Klay Thompson, emotionally and historically, that person is Steph Curry. It would be Steph pushing that bridge. And when you combine that with Steph saying, "I wanted him to still be here," you understand why the internet caught fire. It's not just fan nostalgia, it's a scenario people around the league can picture as possible at some point. And to close in a way that makes sense, today, Klay Thompson's story with the Golden State Warriors is at one of those points where nothing is decided, but nothing is completely dead either. There's the cold basketball side saying the immediate fit is difficult, that rosters and priorities change, that the league doesn't wait for feelings. And there's the human side showing that, behind contracts and numbers, there's still respect, longing, and the desire not to let a legacy this big end with a bitter aftertaste. What this behind-the-scenes deep dive really delivers is this. The Warriors and Klay Thompson went through a split full of noise, wounded pride, and too little real conversation at the right time. But time has a way of changing the weight of things. And when Steph Curry puts into words that he wanted Klay close, and when people around the league say a bridge could exist because nobody has more influence over Klay than Steph, it's clear the final chapter still hasn't been written. Now the question is, how could this actually happen? In what scenario would it make sense? And what does Klay Thompson's basketball today allow, or not allow, in a possible reconnection? That's where the conversation gets even more interesting when we look at his current role, what he still brings, and what kind of Warriors team could exist 1 or 2 seasons from now. If you enjoyed this content and want the continuation with this level of detail, leave a like now and subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot for the video to reach more fans, and you won't miss anything when the next update drops.